This week on To the Contrary.
First, Bill O'Reilly is out at Fox News and women's rights groups are celebrating. What impact on sexual harassment at work? And is Ivanka Trump juggling her business and government interests ethically? Then we're starting to see how Betsy DeVos might change the Department of Education.
Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, winners and losers in the Fox News sexual harassment scandal.
Bill O'Reilly, the most popular cable news host, will not return to the Fox network. He remains defiant, denying sexual harassment charges. In a statement, O'Reilly said, quote, "It's tremendously disheartening that we part ways due to completely unfounded claims. But that is the unfortunate reality many of us in the public eye must live with today." End quote. O'Reilly was forced out this week after more than 50 advertisers pulled their ads and women's groups called for his ouster. It all follows revelations that he and 21st Century Fox paid $13 million to 5 women who complained about sexual harassment or other inappropriate behavior by O'Reilly. Former Fox Network chief Roger Ailes was let go in July, also due to harassment allegations. At the time, the Murdochs, who own Fox, pledged to clean up the culture at the network.
So, Sabrina Schaeffer, what impact will this have on employers?
Well, I think it sort of goes to show that we've made huge strides in gender rights and gender equality, but there are sometimes going to be bad actors out there. It's going to cross, industries. And when bad things happen, I think employers need to take them seriously and make sure that both sides are getting the hearing they deserve.
Look, there's a culture problem within Fox News, but also among a number of employers. I mean, it does prove that when the pressure of the purse and advertisers come to bear in the public, that something can be done about it. But, Fox has a problem not just on gender, but also on race. They got to deal with the whole banana.
I think it shows that we need more public accountability for organizations that foster a culture of what you sort of view as inappropriate behavior.
I don't think Fox gets a lot of credit here. They knew about all this. They gave him a $25 million contract anyway. That's why he walked out the door with $25 million. Those women, barely have their dignity. That's just still appalling, I think. I think there's more accountability here. They didn't apologize.
But wait a second. There is, because the contract was signed last month, and they already knew going back to 2004 they had a problem on their hands. There are out clauses, so we don't know for sure it's $25 million yet. It's subject to whatever negotiations their lawyers
But they gave him a new contract knowing he was a sexual harasser.
Sure. Well, that's true, too.
It's not till the New York Times put it on their front pages that they felt the pressure.
Well, but let me ask you this. Rupert Murdoch is, in his 80s, pushing back. His sons are taking over. No, but they play very close to the vest what their political proclivities are, but the rumors are they're more progressive than he is. It'd kind of be hard not to be, but how much did Lachlan and his brother have to do with this decision?
Well, word on the street is that it was actually one of the wives that was sort of pushing for this. And look, I think it's important that there's going to be bad people out there, and I don't really know what happened, not having been in the room in any of these cases, but it's good to keep in mind that there's also really good people, right? I happen to be over at Fox a lot, and there's a lot of really, really nice, upstanding, sort of professional men and women who work there, and so sort of helpful to put in perspective. I think it's awful in the sense that he was, he was their big star. He's the primetime 8 o'clock slot, but hopefully he's not the only one.
Has the atmosphere changed since he left? I know you're over there pretty
here
regularly.
in the Washington studio. I don't really feel a difference, but it's run very professionally here. I have very positive experiences. There's a lot of great guests. I can't quite speak to New York.
So what do you think employers are going to do?
Well, I mean, I think those, especially employers who are really out in front of the public and where they depend on advertising, I mean, they're going to take note of this. And I think the public knows now that we can have a significant impact when there is organizing behind challenging what would be the conventional theology, which would have been to put him on break for a little bit and then bring him back. That couldn't happen in this case.
Was it a gain for women? Did women cause him to be pushed out finally, or was it responding to advertisers?
Well, how many women are left at Fox News, to be honest with you? I think it probably was a push towards advertising. I think it was a business decision on the part of Fox. But what I will say is that some of this has to do, I think, to some extent with what I would call like a Billy Bush effect, if you will. When you think about the Access Hollywood tapes and that dialogue, a lot of this is, I would hope that you see more men in these workplace environments take a leadership role in stepping up and saying where women aren't able or not comfortable with pointing out and accusing someone of something so egregious as sexual harassment. I think the idea is that we hope that maybe there are more people that aren't Billy Bush-esque in their sort of complicit nature and being more engaged and talking to people about, hey, this is a problem, this person's behavior is a problem, we need to do something about it.
And I don't think it's because they're a conservative network. I mean, I think there are conservative broadcasters that are perfectly gentlemanly towards women. I do think there's kind of some generational interest, for me anyway, because when I was growing up, it was a skill set to be able to navigate sexual harassment, because I don't know any woman my age who didn't experience it. And what, Alison Camerata said this week when she said, we used to think that success was actually navigating when people harassed us. Really, success now is taping it. And that's a change.
And I think that's important for the flip side, too, because, putting this case aside, I think that we have to be careful not to always rush to judgment, because lives can be ruined, right? And we want to make sure that real gender equality means that we're making sure that both parties, sort of take responsibility when it's necessary, and that, some situations are harassment or even worse, and those need to be taken very seriously. But we want to make sure that we're not sort of jumping the gun because we want to be extra careful now.
But we have to have rules in a workplace environment that enable women to step forward legitimately and not just depend on the graciousness of men to step and protect them.
Well, when you think about this, will this firing have the following effect? Macris, the woman in 2004 who was a producer, and she had an audio tape of him saying some really horrible things to her. Mm-hmm. And yet at first she was just ignored. It wasn't till the tape came out that finally they decided to pay her off, and they did so as quietly as possible. Will this give more truthfulness, more weight to the accusations that women make in the future?
Well, evidence is evidence, and I think part of the issue is what sort of the goal is. Too many women feel like their careers are going to be ruined if they do come out more publicly, and so they're willing to take money and stay quiet. And I don't blame them for that, right. But I feel like that hurts the overall system, because women need to feel that they will be a hero if they come out and claim this and claim the truth.
But don't you think this will serve as an example? I can't remember her name, but I was in local news in the 80s and worked for NBC as a correspondent. And there was a woman who sued. She was at a local station somewhere in the Midwest, and her Jessica somebody. Anyway, her reputation was ruined. Right. Jessica Savage, and she never worked again. And, was this fair?
Well, I think I'm sure that is a huge concern for a lot of women, and it sounds like something horrifying to go through. And I'm also wondering sorry to always say on the flip side, but I am wondering how many women are sort of reading the headlines and thinking, oh, wow, I wonder if I should say something next time that's not true, because they're watching women walk away with sort of large sums of money.
Look, I think most women don't do that. Women don't claim rape falsely. They don't say they're being abused in their homes falsely, and they don't make that claim falsely either.
I don't think you get a lot of benefit
there's too much
from
at stake to do that. And I think, if anything, what this does is it forces the rest of us to say, this is what's appropriate and not appropriate in a workplace. And if there's a generational shift, let's take advantage of that right now.
And I mean, is there a man in America who can say he wasn't aware of Bill O'Reilly's firing and what he did? So we hope maybe to think twice, or prevent even that kind of them from thinking it's okay to do that kind of behavior?
I'll be curious to see what comes of Bill O'Reilly if he gets picked up by another network and has another opportunity, because I think it said a lot about the risk associated with him. So will another network pick him up and pretend like none of this happened and it couldn't happen in their own newsroom if the allegations are true? And so I think that'll be interesting to see if we've made some progress simply by having Fox relieve him of his role.
Right, and it must be said, some people get fired for this and some people get elected president. Right. So, well, you know, the consequences of this kind of bad behavior from men are not always ones that make people afraid.
Very good point. Let us know what you think. Please follow me on Twitter @BonnieUrbay. From Bill O'Reilly to the first daughter.
Ivanka Trump faces new questions of ethical conduct and conflict of interest now that she's a government employee with a West Wing office. According to the Associated Press, Trump's business was granted provisional trademarks from the Chinese government the same day she was having dinner with her father and the president of China. And while President Trump was signing executive orders promoting Buy and Hire American this week, Trump family businesses, including Ivanka's, continue to import products made overseas. Ivanka Trump is no longer involved in day-to-day operations of her company, but she still owns it as part of a trust.
So is it legal or ethical for the daughter of a president to be making personal gain, because you make more money when you control patents over your brands, while she's in the White House at a state dinner with another head of state?
Well, I mean, what is not ethical is the idea that this family continues to make certain that it profits off of Donald Trump being president of the United States. And I think it's very problematic. I think, there has to be a brighter line between the White House and their business, and simply having a trust just doesn't do it, because it ain't blind. I think this is all going to come to roost. And frankly, if we could see Donald Trump's tax returns, that would actually begin to tell us an awful lot about what their interests are and their relative interest around the world when it impacts public policy. So, I think there's a long way to go on this.
But there was a protest on tax day. It didn't do a thing to move the
We don't
needle.
need a protest. We need his tax returns.
This certainly looks a little uncomfortable at best. I don't really know the details. I do know, though, that I think one challenge
the details are that she had.
And I don't think it happened that quickly, right?
No,
that
same
night.
day.
Right. So
same day.
But I would imagine this was in the process, but it still might be untoward. I have no idea. We can assume it was in some way. I think it goes to the larger point that as government grows, it makes it harder and harder for us to attract people who are not career politicians into the White House. And I think that that's something that's problematic, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. We want people who have real world experience. In theory, it should be a good thing that we have people in the White House who have all of this business experience, but we are very concerned, perhaps rightly, that they're entangled because government is so powerful. And so I think that there's a legitimate concern about how do we roll back government enough so that we can attract better people, whether they're on the right or the left.
So I think that Ivanka Trump learned at her father's knee, and this is a kleptocracy for the Trump family, whether it's, constantly dinners at the Trump hotel or the golf courses or the this, or, Ivanka's wearing all her clothes from her brand whenever she's on TV. But I actually have a conflict about attacking Ivanka Trump, so I don't do it. I think this is her father's responsibility, and that's because, I actually hope and pray that her being in the White House does ameliorate some policies that I feel like are the worst instincts of, the other side of the Trump administration's staff. And so there is this kind of hope and prayer that she will be the advocate for women that she said she would be. There are a few tests, whether it's childcare, whether it's Planned Parenthood. She failed the one on LGBT kids. But, so I do think this kind of a constant sort of scrutiny on her has a conflict for people like me.
That's an interesting point you bring up, because every Republican woman I know, and I'm friends with many, they all say the same thing. We've got to keep her there. There's been no evidence of her having any influence on any policy, from presidential appointments to to the environment, to women's rights, and even
They said she was sad about the Syrian children and encouraged the president to act. So that, but not a progressive issue, and not exactly a something that our hopes are. But
I mean, how long is this hope going to go on?
But you know what? She could have that same. She could have that same influence
with a clean business,
not being, at the public dole, even if she's not getting paid in the White House. She could have that influence.
But if she weren't a White House staffer, it'd be even worse, because then she would be completely free to go out and pursue her business interests. I mean, she canceled her book tour this week because she didn't want it to be seen as though she was promoting her business. So I think that, but they're not doing the ultimate thing. They're not getting rid of their assets, right? They're making sure that their assets still grow. And that's an ethical test.
Where's the public outrage?
I think it's hard.
I mean,
I think it's actually really hard for people to
He was elected. People knew this about him.
Clinton doing this, or Obama, or President
different.
Bush.
I think I come in a different angle on this, which is that, yes, at a minimum, it's ethically dubious, to say the least, that there are these conflicts and that Ivanka had this,
and that he
conveniently got a trademark the same day as a meeting.
Remember, this is the guy who was going to drain the swamp.
Sure. No.
That's my point.
I hear you. I don't spend a lot of time on the show defending the Trump administration or Donald Trump, but what I will say is that I also don't believe that everything is like House of Cards and there's a sinister motive here to maximize the profitability of the Trump organization. You heard Donald Trump Jr. right after the election saying, "Oh, we're going to put in a blind trust," but he didn't know what a blind trust was. You know what I mean? Like there's a naivete there. I think Ivanka, from her standpoint, I don't think that she's sitting here trying to find a way to use her daughter as a prop to make money off of for the Trump organization. I think she's a mother who had her daughter in a room with a Chinese president and she sang a cute song. So I guess in my mind, I take a step back and I try to give them a tad of the benefit of the doubt on their ability to sort of navigate these conflicts. But I agree with you, the lines have been blurred and there do need to be some clarifications. But we're in uncharted territory. This is not a president that runs a multi-billion-dollar organization. We haven't had that before.
And the reason that the American people aren't outraged is because they were desperate for someone who did not come from Washington. And so whether you like him or don't like him, and there's plenty of people who don't like him, they still wanted someone who brought something different to Washington, and they wanted someone who had that business savvy. And so there's definitely, as Jen said, some ethical concerns here. But I think that better than sort of focusing on that is to focus on how do we get beyond that for the next president and the president after that, so we can attract good people.
Well, Donald Trump praised a human rights violator in Turkey.
All right, we're out of time, sorry, on this segment. Behind the headlines, from the White House to the Department of Education.
Education Secretary Betsy DeVos signed an order reversing Obama administration reforms that strengthen protections for borrowers of student loans. The goal of the reforms DeVos reversed was to support student borrowers so fewer of them defaulted. DeVos defends her actions as intending to limit the cost to taxpayers and increase customer service and accountability. The Education Department is responsible for administering $1.3 trillion in federal student loans. Meanwhile, DeVos is inciting outrage from racial justice advocates by choosing the woman she named to be Deputy Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights. Candace Jackson, who is also temporary head of that department, once complained she was being discriminated against as a white person. Jackson also wrote an op-ed charging that affirmative action promotes racial discrimination. Her office is responsible for protecting students from racial, gender, disability, and age discrimination. It investigates thousands of civil rights complaints each year.
So is this Jackson woman going to find that all complaints of discrimination against by people of color should be thrown out and incite a growth in the number of white people saying they were discriminated against?
You know, the far right has had an agenda with the Department of Education for the last literally since it was created, that they wanted to get their hands on it. They finally have a leader in Betsy DeVos who wants to execute on their wishes, which is pulling back on protecting kids' civil rights, pulling back on supporting public schools, pulling back on thinking about how to kind of maximize that public school experience. And so I do wish that they would figure out how to just focus on getting kids ready for this economy that they're facing. But they seem to want to reverse engineer all of the progress this country has made in diversity and inclusion and empowerment in a way that I find is distracting and really, like as a taxpayer, offensive.
Is the goal here, it must be asked, to dismantle public schools completely? Because
No, it's
the
not
more
the goal.
the more charter schools, the more privatization of the Department of Education, the fewer public schools there are going to be.
No, and we just had an event on this last week with a number of strong sort of school choice advocates. But the goal is not to get rid of public education because a lot of people like their public school. The goal is to give more families a choice of where they can send their children, whether that's a religious or a religious school, or a private school, or a public school, or a charter school, so that parents and families have more control over the kind of education. We have to remember we are a country of 300 million people. The idea that we are 340. The idea that we are going to all share the same values when it comes to how to educate our children is what drives us apart, what creates these wedges. Let's give people, especially those families who are in failing school districts, the choice. And I think it's easy to go after Betsy DeVos. She's said a couple of things that people, there's lots of outrage, as we said. But I think if we sort of step back for a minute and think about what the end goal is, which is to educate more children and give them more opportunity, I think we can come to the table together on this.
Well, but she also has a huge financial. We were just talking about Ivanka Trump, but she came from Michigan, where she was. Her family has businesses starting private school, charter schools, and she's. This is also. I mean,
right.
It's money for her.
But I don't know too many people who have gotten extremely rich off the education system. We don't have an education market currently. I think that this is a very wealthy woman who has been tremendously generous to the school choice movement, no doubt. But that is hardly sort of the same thing as what we're talking about inside the White House and some of those concerns.
Well, the student loan servicing industry actually has gotten quite rich off of the education system, and I think it's very problematic to, put in place a system again where young people can go into extraordinary debt because there are people who are profiteering off the student loan system, and to have somebody who's at the deputy at the in civil rights not appointing someone who's really in charge of the division because you don't want to go through the Senate scrutiny. And I think that is very problematic because there are a lot of things that can happen at the policy level, and there's nobody to account for that. And so this has been a systematic dismantling and desire to dismantle public education, and these early moves by the Trump administration really signal the direction they want to go.
Well, but I also, how much can the public school system stand of having money and students taken away from it by charter schools before it collapses?
Not enough. That's why it's a false choice. It's just false to say, well, we're just going to support other forms of education. I give Secretary DeVos some credit. This week she went to a small town in Ohio with the president of the teachers union to meet with families that are in the public school system, and that district voted for Donald Trump like in the 70%. And what she learned there, though, was parents saying, please don't divert money from our public schools. They were supporting the public schools, saying that this isn't about choice. You're going to take money out of the community and you're going to send it to private schools too far away. We're not going to get the benefit of it, and our kids need the money in the public education. And so if you were going to add a lot more new money and say, all right, we're going to experiment and add money to charter schools or to give them to church schools or something, that's fine. But you're not. You're taking it away from public schools.
And what a lot of them are doing, by the way, they're cutting music education, they're cutting
Do we know how
arts
much they're
education.
spending, though, at these schools? Do people really know? I mean, in Arlington, where I live, in Virginia, they spend close to $28,000 per student. That is equivalent to the private education tuition here in Washington, D.C. I think that people are unaware of how much public schools are spending per pupil. And if you dig a little deeper and you look at the fancy
families
buildings,
rely on that. That's why they pay taxes.
Well, and the vast majority of our students receive a public education, and we can't afford to take money away from those students for public education.
I think if you can't educate a child at $28,000, then we're doing something wrong.
Yeah, but you're picking one of the richest.
No, but if you look at some of the
counties
poorest,
in the country,
at the Cato
if you
Institute,
look at Arlington, which is next to Fairfax, which is one of well, we're out of time. Sorry, got to run. That's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website pbs.org/to the contrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.